The conflict in Ukraine has changed the world. From an aeronautical point of view, air routes have been affected to unimaginable extremes, apart from the fact that ticket prices have also increased a lot. Why is Qatar the main beneficiary of the Ukraine conflict? Why does this commercial plane teleport? Or why have Russian airlines stopped being safe? That's what you're about to discover. All air routes operated by airlines are the end result of many years of work. First, you have to think about the route you want to open. For example, if we take Iberia as a reference, the flagship airline of Spain. If suddenly they wanted to open a new route with the Middle East, the first thing they would have to do would be to conduct a study about whether this would make sense or not. This would mean that they would have to pull out a statistic of the number of people who fly to that destination and see if there is a possibility of creating an extra new route with the existing ones from other airlines. If this study were favorable, one would have to think about what type of aircraft could cover this route, depending on whether more or less people need to be transported. It could be done with a 330, with a 350. Or there could even be the possibility that the airline would consider buying a plane they don't have at this moment to open this new route, and perhaps others in the future. There could also be the possibility that Iberia already has all the planes assigned to some route, so they could eliminate a route that was not having much success to replace it with this new one, which in principle is going to be successful. After that comes the interesting part. The airline is going to have to process the permits to reach that new country. In a previous video, I explained all the existing air freedoms. Assuming the route was going to be Madrid-Qatar, passing over Italy, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and then Qatar. Iberia would have to process the permits so that both Italy and Egypt, as well as Saudi Arabia, would allow them to fly over their territories. They would then need to process the permit for Qatar to allow them to land on its territory. The issue didn't require discussion with airports and control towers. These permits are requested at a much higher level in the country. In other words, it is the governments of the countries who grant these permits. There is also the possibility that this route is accepted by all the countries involved, but for any geopolitical reason, suddenly that permission is withdrawn, making it really complicated for the airline. If Italy were to revoke Iberia's permission, it wouldn't be a significant issue after some time. It would take longer, but you'd still reach your destination. But if it were Egypt that revoked the permission, now Iberia would have to get other countries to allow them to fly over their territory in order to modify the original route. Otherwise, they would have to cancel that journey. On February 24th, 2022, the invasion of Ukraine began. One of the main sanctions applied to Russia was to eliminate air permits to fly over European countries. The United Kingdom was the first country to implement it on February 24th. Then nearly all European nations, the United States, Canada, and Russia joined. As expected, it responded to this similarly. In my March 2022 video, I explained some of these decisions' immediate consequences. Several flights had to return to their departure airport because the restriction caught them in mid-air. But as the weeks went by, something even more interesting happened. You could see how air routes were drastically changed to avoid flying over Russia and Ukraine. The first few days were chaotic because the European bans on Russian airlines didn't all come at once. One day they could fly over a country, but not the next. This was clearly seen with the Aeroflot AFL 2091 route between Belgrade and Moscow, which normally took this route from here. The problem is that Poland was one of the first countries to ban its airspace to Russian airlines. So 2 days after the invasion, the route had to go around Poland. The problem is that on the same day, other European countries also banned Russian airlines, so going around was no longer an option. So the next day, they would have to go underneath and around the Caucasus, increasing the flight time to about 6 hours in total. The next day, the route had to be canceled. But as the weeks went by, and with all the restrictions already on the table, the airlines started trying to plot new routes. The most affected European country has been Finland, and in particular the airline Finnair, which was fighting to carve out a niche in long-haul travel to Asia. The problem this airline has experienced is that from Helsinki, the capital of Finland, the shortest route to Asia would always go over Russia. The most affected flights were Helsinki-Shanghai and Helsinki-Tokyo. Are you watching? These are the original routes, but with the bans, the flights had to be transformed into this. The flight duration to both Shanghai and Tokyo increased by approximately 3.5 hours. But something absolutely impressive happens with the flight from Helsinki to Tokyo. Because to return back to Helsinki, the shortest route is not the same, but in the opposite direction. Instead, the shortest route goes north from Japan, turning slightly eastward. It reaches the Bering Strait and continues straight until it reaches the North Pole and begins to descend to enter Finland from the north to the south. If we look at a spherical map, we can see that it's as if the plane is going around the world. The round trip through the northern hemisphere is absolutely fascinating. But when viewed on a two-dimensional map, the return trip is even more striking because you can see how the plane travels north and then suddenly teleports. This is an effect of projecting a spherical map onto a rectangle. This happens because the entire line at the top of the map rectangle is actually a point. In this case, Finnair has studied that due to wind conditions and other factors. It is better for a flight to cross Europe and Asia, but the return flight should continue to the north and east. The crisis has significantly impacted all European countries, including France, Great Britain, Germany, and Holland. All these countries, if they wanted to reach Asia, would trace these routes, but now they have to go around Ukraine and the Black Sea to the south. If anyone wants to know how to calculate the shortest route between two places, the best way is with Google Earth using the measure option. You put any point on the map and the second point also where you want, and it will trace the shortest route between these 2 points. This table represents several of the routes that have been affected. The first column shows the airline, the second shows the departure airport, and the other columns show the destination airports. The most affected routes, as we can see, have been for Finnair on their flights from Helsinki to Japan and Shanghai. But you can see how all airlines have actually been affected to a greater or lesser extent, but these are just the ones represented in this table. Really, any long-haul North American, European, or Russian airline has been affected, right? Another really fascinating example is that of Aeroflot's AFL 157 flight, which connected Cancun in Mexico with Moscow. Originally, this flight traced the shortest route, passing through the United States, Canada, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Estonia. But of course, all these countries banned Russian airlines from flying over their territories, so this route had to be modified. And it came to this. Flight time increased considerably, also increasing the price of the tickets. A few days later, this route was cancelled. There is a crucial point to mention here. The European Air Authority, that is the European Aviation Safety Agency, some time ago made public a list of airlines that do not meet European safety standards. This list is informative because these airlines are banned from flying over Europe due to non-compliance with safety standards. The European Aviation Safety Agency has published it, so you can consider it when flying anywhere else in the world. Well, the curious thing is that if we look closely, there are many Russian airlines, up to a total of 23, but why? The sanctions imposed on Russia included stopping support for their airlines, which is a serious matter. If they are operating Boeing or Airbus aircraft, they won't receive replacement parts. So either they stop the operations of these European and American-made planes, or they continue with the operation, trying to do the support themselves. The first option is a real suicide, because it would basically stop the entire fleet of planes, so they have tried to carry out the second option. Many people will say that Russia has a very good industry to be able to make the parts it needs. The problem with this is that it is proven that planes are safe in their original form. A plane must pass all required tests with its original parts. Changing them raises uncertainty about its performance and behavior. Because it has been shown over the years that materials in aviation change their behavior a lot, depending on how they have been manufactured, and this is crucial. So this is the reason why these Russian airlines have been included in this list. I thought it was important to mention this point, as there have been several incidents with Russian airlines in recent months. But then, who have been the real beneficiaries of this situation? If we've seen that European, North American, and Russian airlines have fared poorly, which ones could have benefited? Well, mainly the Persian Gulf Airlines and Turkish Airlines as well. As Euro-Asian routes have become costlier or unavailable, people must consider alternative travel options. In recent decades, Persian Gulf Airlines have built a real empire to connect Europe and Asia, and this situation has worked out perfectly for them. We're discussing airlines such as Emirates, Qatar Airways, and Etihad, which have fully leveraged their geographical location. Let's examine how these airlines operate, using Emirates as an example. From any European capital, you can go to any Asian capital, passing through Dubai. All flights are designed to arrive within a time frame, and a couple of hours later, all the other flights will depart to different Asian cities. in such a way that a plane going from Madrid to Dubai will go with a percentage of people that will have final destinations: Japan, Thailand, Indonesia, India, and Vietnam. That is, what Emirates does is first take everyone to Dubai. And in Dubai, what it does is distribute those people to the planes that are going to their final destination, to the destination they really want to go to. If we represent it with an animation where the red dots are the people going to Japan, the green dots are those going to Thailand, and the blue dots are those going to Vietnam, we would see how all the planes arrive from Europe to Dubai with all those dots mixed on the planes. But at the airport is where they are organized so that they all get on the same flight depending on what their final destination is. That's how it works with all the destinations, in such a way that they can guarantee dozens of daily connections in practically all the cities of the world. This business model was already working very well for them thanks to globalization, but the geopolitical situation has made it even better. Flying over Russia is prohibited for European and North American airlines, not universally, just a reminder. But the Gulf countries do not suffer these sanctions. So in addition, they are also currently a very good way to connect people who want to go from Europe to Russia or vice versa. In addition to this, they also come out ahead in another thing. When a Russian airline absolutely needs a part from Airbus or Boeing, they can't sell it directly to them because of the sanctions. What happens is that the Russians ask a Gulf airline to buy that part and then resell it to the Russians. Airlines would take a commission during the process. Another option for flying to Asia is to use a Chinese airline which can fly over Europe and Russia without issues. So these airlines can continue their original routes without any problem. If you plan to travel from Europe to Japan or Korea in the next few weeks, you'll likely fly with a Chinese airline and stop over in Beijing. For more information on air routes and the world's longest routes, check out the 2 videos I mentioned at the end of this video.